The first time the truck touched my bumper, I actually apologized. I remember shaking my head and saying out loud, maybe he just wasn't paying attention. 10 minutes later, I was driving at over 100 miles an hour across an empty desert highway, convinced that if I slowed down for even a second, I would never make it home. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old, and everything you're about to hear happened during a business trip I should never have made alone. I'd spent the day visiting a customer in a remote part of the state. By the time I finished the paperwork and started driving home, it was already late. According to my dashboard clock, it was 2:37 a.m. The GPS estimated another 3 hours before I'd reach home. The nearest town was almost 50 miles behind me. The next petrol station was still more than 40 minutes ahead. Out there, the desert feels different after midnight. The darkness isn't simply the absence of light. It feels endless. Even with the windows closed, I could hear sand skimming across the road whenever the wind picked up. Beyond the reach of my headlights, the landscape vanished into a black emptiness that made it impossible to judge distances. For nearly an hour, I hadn't seen another vehicle. Then 2 headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. At first, I welcomed them. It's surprising how comforting another vehicle can feel when you've been completely alone for that long. The lights grew larger much faster than they should have. Within moments, I realized it wasn't a car. It was a white articulated truck. Instinctively, I moved slightly toward the shoulder to let it pass. It never did. Instead, it settled only a few feet behind my rear bumper. The truck was so close that I could no longer see its grille. Only 2 enormous headlights flooded every mirror with white light. I flashed my hazard lights once. Nothing. I increased my speed from 70 to 80. The truck matched me perfectly. I slowed again. It slowed too. At first, I kept inventing innocent explanations. Maybe the driver was exhausted. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe he simply didn't realize how close he was. Then the truck nudged my rear bumper. The contact was gentle, almost polite, but it was enough to send a vibration through the steering wheel. I glanced into the mirror, expecting to see the driver raise a hand in apology. Instead, I froze. The cab looked empty. I blinked hard. The reflection from my own dashboard lights made it difficult to see through the windscreen, so I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. Still nothing. No movement. No outline. No face. Only darkness behind the glass. Before I could convince myself I'd imagined it, the truck struck my bumper again. This time the impact was harder. The rear of my car stepped sideways just enough for the tires to chirp against the asphalt before regaining grip. That was the moment I stopped making excuses. I grabbed my phone and called emergency services. The operator answered immediately. Keeping one hand on the wheel, I explained where I was, described the truck behind me, and told her it had already rammed my car twice. She asked for the registration number. I looked again. There wasn't one. The front plate bracket was completely empty. She instructed me to continue toward the next service station where police units were already heading. Before I could answer, the signal disappeared. The call ended. No reception, only silence. Almost immediately, the truck hit me again. The impact traveled through the entire chassis. I accelerated without thinking. 90 miles an hour, 95, 100. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors. The distance never changed. What frightened me most wasn't how aggressive the driver was. It was how patient he seemed. The truck never tried to overtake. It never forced me off the road. It simply stayed exactly where it needed to be, applying just enough pressure to keep me terrified. Then I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Every emergency pull-off along the highway disappeared before I could reach it. Whenever I approached one, the truck moved even closer, leaving no safe distance to brake. It wasn't chasing me. It was controlling where I could and couldn't go. Someone behind that was thinking several moves ahead. A few miles later, amber warning lights appeared in the distance. A road maintenance crew. Relief washed over me. I leaned on the horn and flashed my headlights repeatedly. The workers looked up. For the first time since this nightmare began, the truck dropped back. I thought it was over. Then the truck accelerated. The workers barely had time to dive behind the crash barrier before 40 tons of steel thundered between us, missing both them and my car by only a few feet before sliding back into position behind me as though nothing had happened. That was when I understood this wasn't road rage. This was murder. The maintenance crew contacted police immediately. I didn't learn that until much later. By then, I was already climbing into a series of steep hills where the road twisted between cliffs and deep drops. The truck became more aggressive. Each impact arrived a little harder than the last. The smell of overheated tires seeped into my car. My shoulders ached from fighting the steering wheel. My fingers had gone numb from gripping it so tightly. Then something happened that I still replay in my head. As we rounded a long, sweeping bend, the truck drifted slightly wider than before. For less than a second, I had a perfect view through the driver's side window. There was a man inside. He wasn't unconscious. He wasn't slumped over. He sat perfectly upright with his hands resting calmly in his lap. He wasn't watching the road. He was watching me. Meanwhile, the steering wheel turned on its own with tiny, precise movements. I nearly hit the guardrail trying to process what I'd seen. The truck corrected itself effortlessly and continued following me as though guided by an invisible driver. The final hill arrived a few minutes later. The road curved sharply left around a rocky outcrop. I followed the bend. The truck didn't. It continued almost perfectly straight. For one surreal moment, it seemed to float beyond the edge of the highway before disappearing into darkness. Several seconds later, the explosion rolled back through the valley. A fireball climbed into the night sky, illuminating the desert like sunrise. After 40 minutes of driving without stopping, I finally pulled onto the shoulder. When I opened the door, my legs collapsed beneath me. I couldn't stand. Police reached me shortly afterwards. The investigation uncovered something none of us had expected. Months earlier, I'd submitted dashcam footage after witnessing a violent collision. My recording had identified the truck driver responsible. He'd lost his commercial license because of my testimony. According to investigators, he'd spent months tracking my routine, waiting for the one journey where I would be completely alone. The truck hadn't been chosen because it was the easiest way to kill me. It had been chosen because no one looks twice at a lorry following another vehicle on a motorway in the middle of the night. The case was closed quickly. Premeditated homicide. Driver deceased. Investigation complete. Or so everyone believed. 2 weeks later, I collected my repaired car. As I signed the paperwork, the mechanic walked over holding something small wrapped in a grease-stained cloth. "I found this behind your rear bumper," he said. It wasn't damaged in the crash. It was tied there. Inside the cloth was a GPS tracker. The battery indicator was blinking its final warning. Police later confirmed it had been attached before I ever left for that business trip. He hadn't found me by chance. He hadn't stumbled across me on that highway. He knew exactly where I was going long before I ever saw those headlights in my mirror. And sometimes, that's the thought that still wakes me in the middle of the night. Because being followed is terrifying, but discovering that someone already knew where you would end up is far worse. So if a vehicle seems to know every turn you're about to take, don't immediately assume it's following you. Sometimes, the most frightening possibility is that it already knew your destination before you did.